This is the best computer Apple has ever made, the 2010 Mac Pro. And even though it was originally unveiled 15 years ago, it has continued to be my main computer for nearly 8 years. I got this unit from a family friend for free back when I was in 5th grade. Now, I'm a high school graduate. And the 2010's near infinite expandability has truly given this machine a new lease on life, allowing the consumer to upgrade their system far beyond Apple's original intent, and using new software that was never designed for CPU architectures that are coming onto 16 years old. It's what makes it the least Apple product ever sold. However, this machine is starting to show its age, not in its speed or lack thereof, but simply compatibility. Apple is dropping support for Intel Macs from their new OS releases next year. New instruction sets released just won't work with the CPU architecture of the 5,1, and new AMD GPUs are not getting new macOS drivers. Finally, we have some limits on how much we can upgrade this system, and in this video, we're going to do just that. I'm going to push this hardware 15 years into its future and make the world's fastest 2010 Mac Pro. And welcome back to my room. It feels like it's been ages, and well, it has been since I've last shown you guys it. And well, our main thing to look at today is the Mac Pro, of course. And so what we have to do is to swap out all of the parts into this guy. We have to take it off the setup, detach all my peripherals and those peripherals, and unplug all 19 cables that are keeping this tethered here and move it to my space where I work on stuff like this. So let's get on and do that. All right, let the torture begin. Everything is unplugged. We just have to slide it out of here. Well, there you go. Now we just gotta get it out of here. Oh, it's heavy. Alrighty, so here it is. This is my 2010 Mac Pro in all of its glory. And the first thing you gotta do whenever you work on a Mac Pro, of course, open it up. Now, as we take the side panel off of my unit, as you see, it's a little empty. Now, essentially what I'm gonna be doing here is I took all the components out, and we're gonna be piecing this together, going from bottom to the top, CPU, to optical drives. So the first thing we have to do is we're gonna have to get out this CPU tray. There's 2 rectangles here, and these are actually levers, and you push those in, and you simply pull the CPU tray out. Now I'm gonna give myself a little bit of working room here. And now the CPU tray is out of the system. What we're gonna be doing next is taking the heat sinks off and getting to the CPUs, and of course, replacing those old CPUs. Getting into replacing CPUs in a Mac Pro, there's a couple of things you need. Firstly, of course, you need the CPUs themselves. For this, I've got the absolute highest spec chips we can put in here. Dual Xeon X5690s, clocked at 3.46 gigahertz. Each of these have got 6 cores a pop. So of course, I've got 2 CPUs here. To get into the heat sinks, we need this absolute giant honkin' Allen wrench. This is a 3mm key, extra long. And also, just keep in mind, I am not a professional. I am just a kid who likes messing around with Mac Pros. This is not a guide. I myself am using a guide right now. If you're doing this yourself, find a guide. Don't rely on what I do in this video, because if I screw something up, I don't want to be held liable for what you did to your hardware. So find the right guides and follow them. Alright, so we are going to start the process of removing the CPUs from this guy. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to do 2 rotations. This one. Actually, we're just going to do 1 rotation. One. Found the bottom. 1. 2,
3, 2. These things like squealing. There we go. 2, 3. 3. 3. It's gonna be 4. 4. 4. Okay, so that's 4. I'm gonna try giving this a lift. Nope, that's still on there. We're gonna keep going. I think these are about 8 turns, and then we'll have liftoff. All right, I believe I got everything. I think it took about 9 turns to get it off. I think the one thing that's holding me down at the moment is the one connector on this side of the heatsink. So I think if I just pull up, there we go. And that is CPU-A of 2010 Mac Pro. And the way you take a CPU out of a tray style like this is that this is an arm right here. Push down on it, you pull it up, and then it lets go. And now we will take our CPU out. Right now, I'm gonna put it off to the side. And now we will take our heatsink, move it to the side, take the CPU tray, move it over out of the way. Got our X5690 here. Take R to clean 1, give this a quick clean. And now we're gonna let that soak there for a bit. This stuff removes any remaining thermal paste that's on here. Now, I've already gone over R to clean with this stuff when I received these CPUs about a month ago from China. And I'm only just doing this as a precaution to make sure that all remaining traces are gone. So now we've waited a bit, we're gonna take our microfiber cloth, and this is my purely CPU cleaning microfiber cloth. Hold on to this guy and just sort of rub. All right, that's looking pretty free of thermal paste. And the funny thing is with this R to clean one, it literally smells exactly like Goo Gone. I am pretty sure this is just some sort of goop remover put into a nice package. We might as well get to work on the heatsink. This giant honking thing. This is a little dusty, but not too bad because I gave it a clean. What we're gonna have to do, we're gonna hit this with the old R to clean 1. Now we're gonna let that sit. This is gonna get all of that nasty goop off. Look at that, just absolutely caked. It's pretty nasty in here. Get all of the remnants off of the mating surface. That's pretty much as good as we're gonna get it. And we're gonna do the same step 2 for the heatsink again. So we're gonna put this on here. Perfect, let that sit for a bit. What the second pass does, this basically, I think this is isopropyl alcohol. It just cleans the surface and makes sure there's no bits on it that might interfere with the contact between it and, of course, the heatsink. And yes, these CPUs are indeed used. So that is why they are I have a bit of surface damage in some spots, but honestly that won't affect the performance at all. Now I have to prepare the surface of CPU B. Let that sit. So we're just gonna make this nice and squeaky clean. I think the funny thing is that the thermal paste has been on there so long it's slightly discolored the mating surface. We might as well start with the most controversial part of this video, applying thermal paste. So just for keeping the socket clean, I reinstalled the 2.66 gigahertz Xeon in here. I don't know the model name by heart. I'm gonna inspect the slot here. There doesn't look to be any dust or fine particulates in there. So we're gonna take our old CPU, put it here, take our new guy, and just carefully put it in. All right, that's in there, and now we're gonna secure it down, push to the side, and under. Now that is ready. So we're gonna take a bit of Arctic MX6, because for some reason they mislabeled this as MX4. It'll be fine. And now what I'm gonna do, I'm probably gonna put just a single lump in the middle, put a bigger one because this is a fairly large die and my hand is super shaky. Oh my God. That should be okay. I've only applied thermal paste once in my life before, so I think that'll be fairly okay. And now we're going to take our heatsink and carefully put this on top of the CPU. There you go. That feels nice and secure on there. And I won't have you watch this again. We're just gonna tighten this all up and we're gonna cut to CPU B. On the lever, pull this up. So we're gonna pull this out. And now we will swap in our second X5690. That's nice in there. Take this, put it down, add in thermal paste. Probably a bit too much, but I think it's perfectly fine. Here we have our surface nice and clean. That feels pretty nice on there. So now we're gonna just screw it all back together. And that is pretty much the hardest part of this entire upgrade done. Both CPUs are installed, thermal paste is applied, heat sinks are on, and now we are left to the rest of the components. Now, firstly, gotta do RAM. And so we're not just putting in what's 48 gigabytes? Nah, we're putting in a full 96 gigabytes of RAM into this guy. So this RAM is 1333 megahertz DDR3 16 gigabyte sticks each. So not the fastest RAM in comparison to RAM speeds of today, but it is more than capable due to the size of RAM that I have, the capacity. All right, 96 gigabytes installed, wonderful. Now the one thing you might be wondering, well Adam, why did you leave a slot empty on each side? Well, with the way these Xeons work, they like using memory in factors of 3. So theoretically, you could put up to 128 gigabytes of memory into this CPU tray. However, it wouldn't run as fast as if it would when you use 6 of them. And so now that we have the memory in and the CPUs in, we're gonna put the CPU tray back into the Mac Pro chassis. CPUs and RAM are in. Now we're going to expansion. And welcome to the Mac Pro's expansion bay. We've got 4 PCIe slots here, 2 X16 and 2 X4s. Now, what exactly are we going to be putting in here? Well, first thing, because this is the double-spaced bracket, is we're going to be putting in our graphics card. And we're not just going to be putting any graphics card in this machine, not the horrible 5770 that was originally in here. We're going to be putting in the Sapphire Radeon 5600 XT. Now this is a very specific card for this machine because Mac Pro graphics are weird. Essentially, some Mac Pro cards, or any graphics card you put in here, they're just not compatible. Then those are NVIDIA cards. Modern NVIDIA cards are not supported by Mac OS. Next, you have unsupported AMD cards. While AMD cards are mostly supported by Mac OS, some of them are too new to work with Mac OS. Some of them, however, can be flashed to work with Mac OS again, but I don't really have the means to do that at the moment. There are some very high power cards that Mac OS does use, like the Vega 2. However, those need to use a power supply mod to power them, as the built-in PCIe power on the motherboard doesn't supply enough to the GPUs for them to work properly. This Sapphire 5600 XT doesn't need to be flashed, doesn't need a PSU mod to get the extra power, and it works, of course, natively with Mac OS. If you want an unmodified power supply, this is the absolute best card you can put in your 5.1 Mac Pro. To unlock it and allow the graphics cards to be removed freely, you take this button, push it in, and you slide it. However, the first thing we need to do is put in our graphics card's power cable. So we're going to take this connector, that's in. Now we have auxiliary B. We're going to slowly align this and slide it into the motherboard, if it would let me. Now, graphics card is in. Let's plug in our power. And so the graphics card is all ready to go. Next thing we're going to be putting into our second X16 slot is this, an NVMe card. In here is my boot drive. Currently I'm booting macOS Monterey 12.7.6. It is the best version of macOS to run on this computer, but it's about to be unsupported, which is annoying. However, Monterey is more than capable enough to be used. Just be careful, and Monterey will serve you for at least another 3 or 4 years. I'm running Monterey on a 2 terabyte Western Digital Blue NVMe SSD in here, and we're going to be putting it into the second slot. Our NVMe drive is installed. Next, let's get some connectivity in here. Firstly, USB 3.0, an absolute must on any computer, especially a Mac Pro like this that only has USB 2.0 ports on it. These won't be supported for UEFI functions, sort of like booting off of USB, and sometimes there is a little bit of trouble with it at startup. However, when you're in the operating system and past OpenCore, this works fantastic. Now our USB card is in. And finally, we have the most elusive upgrade in this entire Mac Pro, the Gigabyte Titan Ridge version 1. This is one of the rarest upgrades you can actually put in a Mac Pro 5.1. This allows you to, yes, activate Thunderbolt 3 on this machine. Essentially, you take video out via DisplayPort from a graphics card, and it converts it to Thunderbolt and gives you an extra DisplayPort. This is incredibly hard to find. They must be flashed. I was lucky enough to find this used on eBay from someone who had this before in their Mac Pro, and I am now using this to power my two 27-inch Apple Thunderbolt displays. It can be fiddly at times, and it takes some hackery to use, but it does work. And now everything is fully seated in for our expansion. A Radeon 5600 XT OWC Excelsior with a WD Blue 2 terabyte drive, 5-port USB 3.1 Gen 2 card, and a Thunderbolt 3 card. And now we're going to be looking at storage. Firstly, for our storage, we're going to need our initial boot drive. Because the way this Mac Pro works is, of course, it doesn't support the latest Mac OS. So you need to have a jumping off point. In this case, the last supported edition of macOS is on this drive, which is actually an original Apple SSD sled containing the original SSD that came with this machine, and it contains Mojave on it. So we're going to be using this as a sort of backup in case we need to get out of OpenCore, but OpenCore will be installed on a separate partition on here, and that tricks the OS enough to allow you to boot into newer versions. And OpenCore also brings all the drivers you need to use your legacy Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and other such devices with modern macOS. So first, 512 gigabyte SSD containing macOS Mojave along with OpenCore legacy patcher. Next up, we have another 512 gigabyte SSD, this time containing Windows 10 on Boot Camp. So we got that in there. That's a Lexar 512 gigabyte drive. This has got my Windows installed in it. I play games on here. And so we're gonna put this into slot 2. Now we're gonna be moving into spinning storage. This is my macOS data drive. This is a 2 terabyte, what brand is this? Hitachi drive. This did originally come with the Mac Pro, and I'll probably upgrade this at some point. The final drive we're putting in is my Windows data. This is a 1 terabyte Western Digital Blue. Put this in my original PC that I built ages ago. Date, April 2016. So this has been kicking around a while. And again, I don't store anything critical on there. I just use it for my Windows data. Now, there's one thing that we have left to do in the expansion section, and that is to close the PCI locking bracket. There you go. Bracket is closed, and now we're on to the final bits of upgrades, the optical drives. You may be wondering, Adam, why in the world would you not just put 2 hard drives here and not use optical drives? Well, I actually use optical media a lot. I have a substantial Blu-ray collection, and on top of that, I also have games that I need to back up, or I need to access them in an emulator. And so I do have optical drives, and I mean plural, because I fitted out this Mac Pro with dual optical drives. Let's just fix this in there. The first drive in here, this is actually a Blu-ray drive, Blu-ray reader, DVD, CD rewriter, and reader. Down here is the original Apple SuperDrive that shipped with this. There we go. The optical drives are indeed installed. Now, there's actually one thing I did forget to put in, and it's something fairly insignificant, but it's the PCIe retention bracket. So I'm going to put this in really quick. And there you go. Absolutely everything is kitted out to the highest level possible in this Mac Pro. Maybe the hard drives could be expanded a bit more, and maybe you could put like 2 Ultra HD Blu-ray drives in there, but that would be way overkill. And of course, the GPU could technically be retrofitted with a flash graphics card, but for those who don't have a PC or the patience to flash a card, this is the absolute best a Mac Pro can be in the year 2024. So let's put on the side panel for the last time. And there we go. A fully upgraded 2010 Apple Mac Pro. Okay, Mac Pro's back. I moved it, I did it off camera because I just didn't want to frame all those shots again. Everything is set up as far as I know. If we figure out that something's wrong, we'll know it fairly quickly. Now, the thing is, with this being so heavily modified, and of course, using our Thunderbolt displays, when you boot up without OpenCore that patches it so you can actually see on them, you can't see anything on the Thunderbolt displays at startup. So I have a nice long blue HDMI cable that runs around and under to my stereo system, and I actually use my TV here to see if the computer posts or not. So I have to turn on my receiver and I have to turn on television. So this is all going to be set up, and now when we turn on the Mac Pro, it's going to take a hot minute because using OpenCore, it takes a long time to post, to chime. And a chime is what we're looking for. If there's a chime, that means that the CPUs are fine and it's all good. If there's no chime, or if there's an SOS signal and the fans rev up, that means that there's something wrong with the CPUs and I have to do everything all over again. So we're gonna turn it on and see what happens. It's plugged in already, so no smoke came out, which means that I didn't screw up horribly wrong. The TV is ready. It says there's no signal, which is fine because there's nothing being sent over HDMI yet. And now we're doing the first startup of my completely finished Mac Pro. So we're gonna hit the power button then. We'll wait for a bong. I heard a bong. Now, all we have to do is wait and see if we get a display. Although there is a strange rattling noise. So when we see the OpenCore boot picker, oh, we got it. It works. Now we just have to wait and see if the Thunderbolt displays come on. That's the other part of this, is that we have to wait through the entire boot up to make sure that it's all fine. Although I am slightly concerned about that rattle. I'm probably going to immediately shut it down and figure out what that rattle is. Regardless, it is booting. It has posted. So that means the CPUs are functional, but now we also have to go into System Profiler to make sure that it can see all the RAM and that everything is fully functional. So now we wait, see if we get a display on the Thunderbolt displays. I don't see the backlights yet. That should be okay. Backlight. 2 backlights, we're good. We're in the system. So loading, we're at the desktop. I'm not even gonna lie, that seemed a lot snappier than it used to be. So I'm gonna quit out of Discord here. Hello. And now we're gonna go to About This Mac. Mac Pro, mid-2010, 2 times 3.46 gigahertz Intel Xeons, but there's a problem with the RAM, 64 gigabytes. So it's not seeing all of the DIMMs. So they may not be seated correctly, or there may be a problem with the CPU. See, yeah, that's kind of wonky like that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take it out, I'm gonna reseat the RAM, and we'll have to see if that works. If it doesn't work, then there's a problem with the CPUs, which is certainly annoying, and I'm going to have to figure that out. Okay, everyone, very exciting news. Let's take a look at About This Mac right here. macOS Monterey version 12.7.6 on a Mac Pro mid-2010 two 3.46 gigahertz 6-core Intel Xeons with our full 96 gigabytes of DDR3. Let's go into memory. Boom. 16 gigabyte sticks. We have our 2 terabyte NVMe. We have our Monterey drive, ignore being Big Sur. We have our macOS data drive, Windows data drive, and of course Windows, my external drives, all my external drives. I have a lot of external drives. And of course, 2 Apple Thunderbolt displays and my TV over there. So yes, everything is done. The Mac Pro officially is complete. Absolutely maxed out with the best possible peripherals imaginable. Maybe a better mouse actually, but the Mac Pro officially is done. So let's take a look at some benchmarks and see how much better it is than what it was originally.
So I'm sure you all must be thinking, Adam, where are you? Because this is not my room, and this is not my Mac Pro. Long story short, I'm living in Kyrgyzstan right now. And the story of that is I'm here on a study abroad. I'm learning Russian language here. This video has actually been in the making now for over a year. Mainly because when I started working on this video was September of 2024. That was also the fall of my senior year when I had 3 AP classes and I was applying to college. And well, it was safe to say that I really barely had any time to work on editing that video. And at that point, I wasn't thinking too much about making this video. I was thinking about recovering from how difficult semester 1 was. But what I want to get to you first is what has happened and what was the result of this video. Because I put a lot of money and I put a lot of time into the Mac Pro, and I'm sure all of you guys are thinking, what now? Because it's nearly now 2026. What's going on? I will say that the Mac Pro has been incredibly usable. Of course, I do have some benchmarks, and so I'll throw those up on screen now. I ran some benchmarks on my original single CPU tray, which was a base model configuration. I think it's the best middle ground to show the difference between a fully kitted out model and one that is still very much the base model from 15 years ago. I will say that the single CPU tray, totally usable as a computer today. There are still drawbacks to it, which we'll get to. In fact, right now, that single CPU tray Mac Pro is what my little brother is using as his main computer right now, and it's still working great for him. So if you're wondering, is it usable to use that computer today? Yeah, absolutely. Now, benchmarks don't really give the most well-rounded picture when it comes to the usability of a machine. And well, I used this machine for about 7 months after I did this build. And what it showed me is that the 2010 Mac Pro, if you put, the best possible hardware in it, it's still an incredibly usable machine 15 years after its original unveil in 2010. I did everything on the Mac Pro when I was using it. I applied to college on it. I wrote essays for scholarship. I edited an insane amount of video on it. Hundreds and hundreds of gigabytes I did of video editing. Gaming, it worked great. I didn't do an incredible amount of gaming in Windows, but doing it on Mac, which was mainly just Minecraft, I got incredibly decent frame rates. All the upgrades came in and really helped. There was a significant change in the usability of the computer, and I really think the main contributor to that is the amount of RAM. 96 gigabytes of RAM is insane, and it makes stuff so much more snappy. At that point, I was still using Google Chrome as my main web browser, and let me tell you, 96 gigabytes of RAM, you will never worry about Chrome ever again. And now there are indeed some cons because of its age, because of the quirks of using a hacked version of macOS. The first major con, and this applies not just to computer geeks or the specificities of my setup, this applies to everyone who wants to do a build like this, is being stuck on Monterey. Now, for me, in some ways, I wouldn't complain about that. Monterey is still my favorite recent version of macOS. It's just Big Sur, just better and more optimized. But now Monterey is unsupported. There are no new security updates. For me personally, I could say that I would still be able to use Monterey perfectly fine for another 2 years from now, December of 2025, because before, on my original Mac Pro single CPU tray, I was using macOS Mojave until 2023, when the OS was 5 years old. And I would say Mojave only stopped being, pretty robust when Google Chrome dropped updates in early 2023. So based on the sort of pattern of how macOS older updates sort of remain in like the spotlight for a little bit longer, I would say Monterey has until around 2027 until it starts to really lose support from third parties and other applications. When Apple gives up support, it's not that big of a deal. As long as you are careful online, you don't have to worry too much about there being security problems, because macOS from the get-go is an incredibly secure operating system. The other thing that affects anyone using OpenCore with a Mac Pro is the insane startup times. You just saw how long it took for the Mac Pro to chime. It took 29 seconds to chime, not get to the desktop. It takes my MacBook Pro about 15 seconds to get to the login screen. And let me tell you, you are going to be shutting down and turning back on your computer a lot, because with OpenCore, and at least how I have to run my setup due to my Thunderbolt displays, sleep is no longer supported. And if your machine goes to sleep, you're going to have to restart it anyways, because when you try to wake it back up, it's going to be completely frozen. So really, it's two problems in one. Genuinely, it's just really inconvenient in the modern era. And it's not the Mac Pro's fault, it's OpenCore's fault, because it's really slow on startup. If I start up Mojave, which is the last natively supported Mac OS, it's like starts in 30 seconds. It's fine. And in addition, this may have been a me problem. The Mac Pro just randomly freezes sometimes, and I don't know why. Like, you step away for a bit, you come back, you try to move the mouse on the desktop, and it doesn't move, the cursor doesn't move, and you just gotta restart it. That happened, I would say, maybe once a week, maybe twice a week. It's not a terrible thing, like everything is saved. You don't have to worry about any loss of data. Maybe there's something going on with my setup because of just how I've had to custom configure my version of OpenCore Legacy Patcher. It's just really annoying, really annoying. The other issues are I/O related. Just the USB 1.1 drivers kind of make things a little bit weird. Occasionally you try to plug in a thumb drive to internal, onboard USB 2.0 ports. It doesn't get recognized. So yeah, that's just the one bypass to it. It's just have a USB card in the computer and you plug stuff into there and it just bypasses any of the weirdness. In addition, Bluetooth, for me at least, just did not work. It's fine. I don't really use Bluetooth accessories. And Wi-Fi also didn't work, and that's fine for me because I also don't use Wi-Fi. I always use Ethernet on my desktops. And the other thing is that every once in a while, there would just be a little bit more beach balling than I would say would be normal, like compared to an Apple Silicon machine, just because it is a bit older. Like, it's a 15-year-old machine. It's gonna have a bit more slowdowns. I would say in day-to-day though, it is still real snappy. Now some issues regarding Thunderbolt, which is a problem that most people aren't going to be facing simply because the Thunderbolt mod is so difficult and the card so rare. It's not really applicable to most people, so I'm putting it in a separate section. Me using Thunderbolt with my Thunderbolt displays is definitely an outlier in my setup, and I would say it's what makes it truly one of the most unique Mac Pro builds I've ever seen because of the Thunderbolt displays. And it just adds a really whole different level of cool factor to it. Like, I'll be so honest. Like, it is objectively really cool. But there are definitely some cons to it. Besides having your Thunderbolt displays, you need to have an HDMI monitor, because if you don't, then you can't see anything on startup. The only time that your Thunderbolt displays will show anything when it's given that final push of the Apple logo into the login screen. In addition, every once in a while, you'd start up the computer and the second Thunderbolt display would show half resolution. Instead of being 1440p, it would render everything at 720p. Everything would be really pixelated. The scale would be completely blown out. The only way to fix it would just be to restart. And just at that point, there'd be something in OpenCore that fixes it, and it's normal. But again, it's just another thing in the pile of weirdness and just inconveniences. And of course, the major thing that I didn't touch in this video, and would frankly take up another hour of runtime, if I brought it in here, would be the process of getting Thunderbolt working. And let me tell you, it took me at least a month to figure this out. I started this process in early July of 2024, and I did a lot of reading on Mac rumors. They have an entire section of the Mac Pro part of the forums that is just dedicated to custom open core setups, and in there's a massive section on Thunderbolt workings because it is so complicated and there's so many things that you have to do. And I only got it working on like the 29th of July after about 30 days straight of testing. Like, it got to the point where I'd work on this all day, I'd get so fed up, and I'd go running at the track. And I am not someone who normally likes running a mile just to get the stress out. Now, I'm already very lucky that I found someone selling a card from their Mac Pro that was flashed for a Mac Pro. And nowadays, you can really hardly find any of these cards, let alone having them flashed. I can't comment on the flashing process because I didn't do it, but I can tell you about all of the open core side of it, which I did have to do. Now, there isn't a lot of documentation on it. The only documentation is in relation to this open core page on Mac Rumors, and that page is for building your own custom build of OpenCore. Like OpenCore Legacy Patcher, it does everything for you. It's completely automated. It just goes through your system and it adds all the bits to your config.p list of all of the hardware that you have, so you don't have to think twice about it. Of course, OpenCore Legacy Patcher does not have anything in mind for if you have a Thunderbolt card. It's just not a default option. And I tried for ages to try to get Thunderbolt displays working with OpenCore, custom configuring OpenCore. And I eventually got to the point it did work. I was able to get both Thunderbolt displays working under Mojave, but it would not let me boot into macOS Monterey, the latest possible version where these hacks would work. So maybe I was thinking, okay, I'm gonna go back to like the Mac Pro knowledge I have in here. Isn't there a guy on YouTube who talks about Martin Lowe's OpenCore package? And yes, there's a very, very cool guy, Mac Sound Solutions. He does a lot of Mac Pro content, and he uses Martin Lowe's OpenCore package. So I was thinking, well, maybe I should try doing it with Martin Lowe's package. I couldn't even get past a couple steps without not even being able to install Martin Lowe's package. So I'm at this crossroads. Mac Rumors set stuff didn't work. The classic Martin Lowe package also does not work. Will my old version of OpenCore Legacy Patcher work in this instance? And it did, because a lot of what you have to do is in the config.p list. It's basically telling OpenCore these are all of the pieces of hardware in the computer, and basically what you do is you go to Mac Rumors page, you copy out the text that you need to put into the config.p list telling how to use Thunderbolt, you paste it in there, and then also on your OpenCore partition you have to put in a special file that you have to compile for your Thunderbolt card. Then you put that as well onto your OpenCore partition, you restart, and it takes effect. Now, I might be missing a couple things here. This was done a year ago, I took no notes, and I didn't do any videos. There's probably something missing in there. But that is the very basic outline of what you need to do to get this working. Granted, this is only so I could use Thunderbolt video. Thunderbolt data worked fine all of the time. No problems. It's just the Thunderbolt display, the Thunderbolt video, it took a lot longer to get working. So if you have more questions, feel free to talk to me. Just like write a comment down below and I can DM you. And try to guide you through the process and see like what I recognize, because I'm one of the few people in the past few years that have, been on the record online saying that they've gotten Thunderbolt 3 working on a Mac Pro. Pretty much the only person I have seen to get it working with OpenCore Legacy Patcher, that is. So that's really all I can say about Thunderbolt. It's that it's not really that worth it. There's just a lot more problems, and the setup takes an absolute age because there's no really proper documentation. Maybe it's just my bad luck and custom config OpenCore didn't work for me, but OpenCore Legacy Patcher did, and there was no documentation on that. That was pure guesswork by me. And now I haven't touched power draw because that's the one thing I wanted to say for last, because it really is the most important thing here. My new MacBook Pro is absolutely faster than my Mac Pro. You won't feel it in the day-to-day work, but you will feel it when you do more power-hungry things. And if you look at idle power draw, on average, the Mac Pro at idle draws about 125 to 150 watts from the wall. My new MacBook Pro with an M4 Pro 48 gigabytes of RAM, on average at idle, draws 6 watts from the wall. That just puts it into perspective how power hungry the Mac Pro is when it's doing nothing. This is really the factor, I would say, nowadays for most people deciding whether they want a 5.1 Mac Pro. It's just not economical nowadays. It just is not. That's really, I would say, even bigger than the lack of security updates, is the cost of the electricity. Of course, depending on where you are in the world, it's not a problem. But in America, I would say it definitely is. So yeah, I would say right now, the Mac Pro isn't necessarily a net negative, and it also isn't a net positive. It's very, very usable, but at the same time, it also draws a lot of power, and it also has a lot of strange software quirks due to having the hacked version of Monterey. I used this machine for about 7 months after I did this build. Unfortunately, I had to retire it. Not because it was broken, and not because it was slow. Definitely not because it was slow. Because I needed a new laptop for college. And I got myself an M4 Pro MacBook Pro, and it has been running wonderfully. But at the same time, if I didn't need a laptop, let's say at that point, instead of having my absolutely terrible early 2020 i5 MacBook Air, I had an M1 MacBook Air, I would still be using the Mac Pro right now. I could have kept using it. It was never slow, it was never sluggish. It had a couple weird hiccups now and again. It's just because my life needed a laptop. It was just a natural time for the Mac Pro to be put to rest. But it was still an incredibly usable computer for being 16 years old. Now, when I got my laptop in January of this year, I didn't immediately start using it. I kept using my Mac Pro as my main machine for 4 months. But in March, I really wanted to bring some of my Final Cut projects on the go with me. So in March, I made my main system swap. And at that point, it was about 7 months out from me doing my upgrades. Right, so now we reach my conclusion. Would I recommend you buying a Mac Pro, a 2010 Mac Pro, and fully upgrading it today, and using it as your main computer? No. Would I recommend you buying a 2010 Mac Pro and fully upgrading it because it's going to be the most fun that you're ever going to have with upgrading Mac hardware for the rest of time? Yes, absolutely, because this is truly the last upgradable Mac, and I'm not counting the 2019 Mac Pro because it's accessible to nobody. Still is, like $2,000 today, and the 2013 Mac Pro is just not upgradable enough to really say you can have a lot of fun with it. The 2010 Mac Pro, you can still do a lot with it, and it's still an incredibly fun box to tinker with. And coupled with that, it's economical in terms of the parts. Not in terms of the power draw, but I would say overall for this project and all the parts, I only paid around $400 over the course of around 8 years. So that is a pretty damn good deal, honestly, for such a fun piece of hardware and such a beautiful piece of hardware. If you find a 2010 Mac Pro near you from like a university surplus, a thrift store, or your uncle just happens to have one for free, take it, because the 2010 Mac Pro is still a fascinating, usable, and beautiful system 16 years after it was unveiled in 2010. And so I think this is a pretty fitting conclusion to this whole Mac Pro saga. It started off 2018 when I got this when I was a rising 6th grader. And now I'm going into college. I'm living in a foreign country, and I'm still talking about this computer. I think that says everything you need to say about how captivating this machine is and how much fun I've had with it for the past 8 years nearly. Thank you all so very much for watching and to listening to this ramble, because this computer is so special and it's so interesting even today. I don't know the next time I'm making a video, because I'm still going to be here for another 6 or so months, and when I get back, I'm going to be getting ready for college. I don't really know what Mac I could talk about next. For all I know, this might be the end of the channel. I really just want to see what the reception is from the community. If it's positive, well, you know, I might talk about another Mac in the future, but I don't think anything will ever really top the 2010 Mac Pro. So, if there is a next time, I'll see you then. Thank you all very much for watching. Goodbye.